Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton. Here's what's at issue this week. Conservative MP Michael Chong has been demanding explanations and actions from the government. This comes after reports he and his family overseas were targeted by China and that a Chinese diplomat based in Toronto was part of it.
You have given accreditation to a diplomat here who is using his diplomatic immunity to target not just me and my family, but other members of Parliament. So why do you, Minister, continue to allow this diplomat to be accredited in this country on Canadian soil?
I understand your frustration and I understand your anger.
So we haven't expelled a single PRC diplomat.
Can I just
We are
finish?
one of the only democratic allies in the NATO alliance that has not expelled a single PRC diplomat.
What we're doing right now as a government is we're assessing the consequences that we'll be facing in case of diplomatic expulsion, because there will be consequences.
The Prime Minister has said he was not aware of the allegations until this week, but has instructed Canada's spy agency to share more information about threats to members of Parliament. Chong says the PM's national security advisor did know. So is there an apparent contradiction here, and what kind of new questions does that raise? How is the government responding? Should it expel Chinese diplomats linked to foreign interference or attempts for foreign interference? Let's bring in everybody. Chantal Hebert, Althia, and joining us this night, Kelly Cryderman, stepping in for Mr. Coyne tonight. Thanks for being here, Kelly. Chantal, I'm going to start with you. I mean, this week obviously started with this story around Michael Chong, which has now become sort of something it seems like the government is not able to contain. What do you make of what we've heard this week?
Well, it would help if, one, the government could get a story straight, and two, manage to keep it straight for more than one day. So having taken 2 days to assert that neither of them, the Prime Minister or the Minister of Public Safety, had been made aware 2 years ago of what was happening to MP Chong. Now today the National Security Advisor says, oops, CSIS did move the file up to the National Security Advisor. It is possible to believe the Prime Minister, who says he only found out in the newspaper, and to believe that that CSIS moved the file up to the National Security Advisor. But it's also convenient in the sense that the National Security Advisor who was saying that today, Jody Thomas, was not the person who was sitting in the chair when that report was moved up to the National Security Advisor. So in clear, someone somewhere, and 2 or 3 people sat in that chair because the job was open in the summer of 2021. Someone somewhere did not move it up, but CSIS is saying it's not us, and the Prime Minister is saying it wasn't me either. Yeah. And that makes the government look like it doesn't have its act together.
Yeah, it is at the very least, Althia, not a particularly reassuring story for Canadians the way this has unfolded.
No, I mean, it clearly took a long time to come to the announcement that they had only learned on Monday. They wanted to clearly be sure that they indeed had only learned on Monday. But to Chantal's point, and there's like a little bit more tick-tawing to that, like there is the Prime Minister coming out and saying that, well, CSIS didn't put it up the chain of command. And then obviously, as Chantal pointed out, we learned that that's not the case on Thursday. But the other thing is the context. The context of July 2021 is the Liberals are getting ready for an election. So was the government distracted, and is that why they weren't briefed at the time? I think there are more questions to be asked about what happened. But I think at the core of the question that you asked at the outset, this is a very, very serious matter. And the Liberals have expelled diplomats for lesser things, in my opinion. The Liberals showed 4 Russian diplomats the door. They expulsed a Venezuelan diplomat because a Canadian diplomat had been expulsed for talking about human rights issues in Venezuela. So the bar has already been set. And while I don't think the government should be rushing, Mélanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, is right to know, like, what are we putting at stake before we do this? They absolutely have to take a firm line, because otherwise they are telling all MPs in the House of Commons that they can be victims of such foreign aggression as well. And, you know, the country is changing. There are lots of MPs from diaspora communities. If you do not take a firm action, you're basically saying that they can all be sitting ducks, or that what you will have are MPs from ethnic communities who are basically spokesmen for their home country. That is obviously not something the government wants either. They're not free to express their own personal opinions. So they absolutely have to take a firm stance.
Kelly.
Yeah, and that's why it's kind of strange that the Foreign Affairs Minister talked today about whether the process and the consequences of expelling a diplomat. And I'm like, why would you talk about what you're contemplating in that detail before you do it? Because it's very difficult to walk that back to say it when you've given such a specific answer. And I think the whole problem with this situation also is we're talking about an MP who has been a very effective critic in calling for a serious foreign policy in Canada for a long time. And he is the one, Michael Chong is the one at the center of this. And he's also someone who is a conservative, but he also has appeal across party lines. And I think it is very interesting that this is the person that everything is focused on, going to the larger theme of the competence by the Liberals on this file, whether they're taking foreign interference concerns seriously when it has to do with Conservatives. The changing of the story now that we're hearing about today is a big concern. And why wasn't this brought up to the top levels? Was it a distraction, as Althia mentions? Or, you know, can the Conservatives make the charge that this is because it's an opposition MP? So I think this situation and pertaining to a very particular person, a particularly effective MP, is very troublesome for the Liberals.
Yeah, and an MP who's, I think, pretty well liked across the board, too, in Ottawa. That sort of focuses the mind. And I wonder, Chantal, too, whether another question could be, was there an impression that this kind of report was not something that needed to be seen or wanted to be seen by the Prime Minister and his office? I don't know, but those are the kinds of things that the opposition can start feeding into.
Well, for sure, this has been a field day for the opposition parties. The government failing to get on top of the narrative, always in reactive mode. First point on this specific file, it makes it look like hostage diplomacy worked. That the two Michaels and what happened has spooked Canada into doing what it should normally do. And that's not the message you want to send. But in the larger picture, I don't think it's so much he said, she said, who did what, or was there a conspiracy to not do anything because it was a conservative. But it goes to government competence, and that is much more lethal for a government seeking a fourth term, that the perception that it's incompetent, that it can't tie its shoelaces on its own, permeates and eventually reaches voters in the sense that they say, well, these guys are just not up to the job or no longer up to the job.
Well, that goes to my sort of first question, Althia. Like, why can't the government get a handle on this in terms of telling people what they know or showing what actions they're taking or any part of it? We're talking about it again and again and again.
Well, they can't seem to get a handle on it because it doesn't sound like the inputs where they're getting their information is to be trusted. I mean, I don't know who told the Prime Minister that CSIS had not moved that up the chain of command, but he obviously felt confident enough with the information that he went out to publicly declare it. You know, if that's the case, then it makes you doubt if you're the leader of the government about the inputs of the sources of information you're getting. So I think that there's a lot more to the story that we probably don't understand at the moment. I will say to Kelly's point, I don't have a problem with the Foreign Affairs Minister explaining the process. I would rather, frankly, have, like the Public Safety Minister in the House of Commons earlier this week, explain why he couldn't say whether or not the government knew when they read it. He could have said, I learned it reading the Globe and Mail, but we are checking to make sure that something didn't fall through the cracks. I would much rather have the government explain how it gets to its decisions than to obfuscate and look like it's hiding, or allow us to fill the blanks because there is no information, or the opposition, right? So I don't have a problem with that. And taking their time to assess whether or not How big the consequences will be about taking this diplomatic action is not necessarily a bad thing either. Ward Alcock was telling me on our podcast a few weeks ago that when Canada expelled 12 Russian diplomats, the Russians retaliated in the same way. They expelled people who hadn't even entered Russia yet, and it set back Foreign Affairs Russia program. It decimated basically that program. So we have a lot of commercial interests in China. There's a lot of stuff happening in China that we, all three of us, probably don't know. Four of us. I guess I could include myself in that. So it is consequential, and I don't know that we have a good idea what the consequences are at this point, and clearly the government doesn't either.
But the political consequences in the meantime, Kelly, persist, right? If you take no action, then the political consequences for the government become difficult.
Yeah, my concern about the Foreign Affairs Minister talking about whether they can expel has to do with laying cards on the table, maybe giving Chinese embassy officials a chance to lobby on this or to counter the argument. And what happens if she doesn't expel now? You know, it could be seen as a sign of weakness. And I think we're hearing this narrative that it has to evolve. Even Alexandra Trudeau talking about how things were different 8 years ago in terms of Canada's view of China. So I think we're seeing a narrative evolve that, yes, we didn't maybe fully realize the extent of how China has changed, but now we are. And I think that's going to become part of the messaging as well.
Last quick word to you, Chantal.
I tried to think this afternoon. I've covered a few governments. I don't think I've ever covered a government that had so much trouble communicating basic facts for its own survival. It's a mystery to me why you would be asked 12 times as public safety minister, did you know, when did you know? And you wouldn't be able to give the kind of answer that Althia has given. And these guys have been in government for 8 years. They still think they communicate well, but they're getting worse at it rather than better.
The Liberals are holding their national convention today, the first since 2018.
We were just about to pick on you, Prime.
That was the Prime Minister at one of the Liberal Party workshops earlier today. His keynote speech on Thursday will kick off a convention meant to help the party renew and re-energize. It's also being touted as an opportunity for the Liberals to contrast their vision for Canada in the next election. So what are the priorities for the Liberals at this convention? What messages are they hoping to send to their base, their supporters? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Althia, and Kelly Cryderman. Good to see everybody. Althia, why don't you start us off? Obviously, it's not a leadership review. The leader's there and staying. He's made that very clear. So what is important about this convention for the party in terms of how it moves forward?
Well, for the party, it's a chance for Liberals to connect and get excited about being Liberals, and for the government, it's a chance to change the channel.
Right.
And for the parliamentary geeks like us, it's just a chance to watch Liberals debate public policy, even though the party, apparently, like all political parties, doesn't really want to talk about policy because they put it at 7:45 on a Saturday morning for only an hour and a half, which is kind of the reason we're here. But any case, no, it is a chance for the Liberals to contrast their vision between what the Liberals want to sell and what the Conservatives are selling. It's interesting that they have Hillary Clinton headlining the show on Friday because she clearly will be a warning of what not to do and how if you are complacent, things can lead to unexpected negative surprises on election night. So it's a moment for Liberals to try to be excited about Liberals, and they haven't had a lot of good news lately. So that's basically it.
I will say, too, 7:45 on a Saturday when there's a king being crowned, probably not the big, I mean, maybe you'll get all the people that don't want that audience. Chantal's face says it all. Okay, Chantal, you go next, and then I'll go to Kelly.
Okay, so according to a poll I read today, only 4% of Canadians are planning to watch the coronation. So it's not as if the bar is set very high on the convention itself. Now, let's be serious. This is more important for party and caucus morale than it is for whatever messages most Canadians who will be possibly enjoying sunshine on Saturday, not the coronation, just normal life.
Just normal life, yeah.
Will probably give it a pass. As for journalists, I'm sure some dutiful journalist will want to watch debates on public policy. But let's be frank here, we'll also be spending time scratching the surface of party unity to see if there are cracks in that faith in Justin Trudeau, and to see if there are other names that seem to generate some excitement. Now, on the leadership stuff, I'll tell you that if there was a single poll, public or private, that showed that any of the names we always hear as possible successors would do much better than Justin Trudeau, we would know about it.
Yes, we would.
And if we don't, it's because there are no such polls that demonstrate that. And that means people will not spend the weekend having grass is greener envy because they have not found much beyond yellow grass at this point.
Although they have found, interestingly, things for all those people who are reportedly interested in the job to do, ways to feature all those people prominently through the convention, which, you know, I would imagine is purposeful as an attempt to say, here, we will spotlight you, but also hold your horses on the rest of it. Kelly, what will you be watching for?
Well, speaking from the land where everybody is great at taking down leaders at conventions, but that's a different story. But it's interesting to me that, you know, it's a convention where the federal Liberal Party seeks to define itself in a, you know, late government stage where, you know, it is at risk of petering out or voters getting tired of the Liberal Party. And, you know, I am struck being in the middle of a provincial election here, how much parties need not only broad support from the public, they need really excited volunteers and they need fundraisers to operate. And I think that is what the Liberal Party is at risk of losing in these, you know, in these next couple of years as we head toward another election and as Justin Trudeau stays on. So I think when I look at the convention itinerary, what is missing to me is some of the issues that the federal Liberals have difficulties with, and that is, you know, a tough discussion about inflation or housing or, you know, even in this foreign interference. I know that is not things they want to discuss, but it's things they have to address if they're going to keep people engaged with the party. I think those are things, you know, that weigh on voters in one way or another, and the itinerary and the schedule that I see for this convention doesn't appear to have a lot of attention given to those things.
Governing parties do not have debates about issues that give them challenges at their party convention, but I suspect that there is one big motivator in the background of this convention, and he's called Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah.
Up to a point, the personality of the current leader of the Conservative Party helps Liberals feel motivated, if not to hang on to power, which is a good motivation, but also to beat him, to stop him from replacing Justin Trudeau. And I think it also is giving energy to the Prime Minister himself to say, I'm up for this fight. I really want to have this fight.
Thank you all so much. Good to see you. Have a good week.